All right. All right, so I guess I'm introducing myself first. My name is Erin Carrillo. My pronouns are she, her, and they, them. I'm a science research librarian at Cabell Library. Thank you all for being here today. I will let Nia introduce herself.
Hi, everybody. I'm Nia Rogers. My pronouns are she, they as well. And welcome to today's webinar. We are going to be talking to you about some of the changes from APA 6 to the APA 7th editions. We want to caveat that we are not going to be telling you everything because I don't know if you've ever looked at the manual, but it's quite large. So we're going to just do some highlights about what we think are the major things that you need to carry forward. Um, but this session is no replacement for actually buying the manual. We'd encourage you to purchase the manual, which came out October 1st, 2019, and can be gotten anywhere where you can buy books. As far as I'm aware, there is not an electronic version, so you would need to buy a print version. So a couple of things to clear up about what we won't be covering. Chapter 1 gives updated guidance on qualitative, quantitative, and mixed method articles, as well as planning for ethical compliance and data sharing. It does a lot of sort of the underpinning work of a paper or an article. We won't be covering that. So if you are interested in those topics, you'll need to grab the manual. We also won't be covering Chapter 3, which covers journal article reporting standards. They have now significantly expanded those. There are in-depth tables that you'll want to look at in Chapter 3 if you're wanting to understand how the reporting is done in journal articles, but we won't be covering that here either. Do you have any questions about that, about what we're not covering?
Nope.
Okay, so on to the basics of what we're, the beginning, which is the body of paper. So we're breaking this up into the body of paper mechanics, the citation mechanics, and then sort of the philosophical changes. So in chapter 2, the running head is covered. There are also the headers that you use in your paper. The 1 through 5 headers have been changed. So there's now bold and italics and indentions, but they're all different. We chose not to include the specifics here because they are complicated to use and you'd want to use them with examples. So I urge you to look at chapter 2 for that if you are using headers in your paper. Those have all been adjusted for readability. Also adjusted for readability are the fonts. They're now allowing more fonts. It used to be Times New Roman and that was it. And now they're adding other fonts, but please note the sizes of the font, and that is for accessibility. People want to be able to read the paper across a variety of visual abilities. And also because JAWS readers that read papers for you online, need to have certain sizes of text in order to be able to read those clearly. Any questions about that? Okay, then moving on to the next slide. Our friend emojis. Finally, there is some guidance about how to correctly write an emoji, right? So that you want to put the name of the emoji smiley face in brackets, as opposed to inserting an emoji in your paper, which you would not do. That's not the correct way to handle that. And part of that is because different machines have different emojis loaded, so it may not load the paper properly. So description of the emoji rather than the emoji is important. I know that doesn't sound important, but if you were reporting things that other people had written, you would want to be able to report it accurately, including all of the emojis. Chapter 10 is the place where you would go to look for this. It's all the guidance on social media. APA strongly discourages you from citing a retweet. remember that whenever you're citing a quote, you don't want to quote a quote, you want to go to the original, right? This is no different from that. You want to go to the original tweet and cite that individual. And there is a specific table in there that talks about how to cite Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and other things like that. So you want to make sure that you get those exactly the way that APA has them by using the tables. So I urge you to use chapter 10 to look at the table. Any questions about that? Okay. So this one crushes my heart and soul just a little bit. I'm just going to be personal with you for a moment and say it kills me that they're only having one space after a period. I know it's because I learned to type when dinosaurs roamed the earth and they were using typewriters, and you always put 2 spaces after a period. So, but that's no longer considered the readable or accessible. What happens when JAWS readers come across too many spaces is they stop. They assume that there is a stop in the text, and it's not, but it throws off the reading for people who are not reading it for themselves visually, but who are listening to it. So there is a reason behind that madness, but it kills me. Also, they want you to, instead of using italics, they want you to put quotes around things like the, press the F key or anything where you're trying to get somebody to do something like that. Because italic letters are just not very readable. Again, most of the changes that have been made for 7 have been made for readability. Chapter 6 covers the updated guidance for the mechanics of style. So more examples not shown here include capitalizations, abbreviations, and how to employ lettered, numbered, and bulleted lists. So if you're going to do those things in your papers or in your articles, you're going to need to spend some quality time with chapter 6. The bulleted list thing is especially important because it's a big change from the 6th edition. Any questions?
Yes, we have one question. Do we still use italics for foreign language phrases?
Oh, what an excellent question. And I don't know the answer to that, but I will happily research that and get back to you. So is that privately chatted to you, Erin, or is that in the public chat?
Nope, it's in the public chat.
Awesome. Then I will get back with you when we're near the end and I can dig around a little bit. Okay. Thank you for the question. Okay, huge change we can all rejoice and be happy about, which is that the in-text citation for 3 or more authors is now shortened to the first author plus et al. That is an enormous change. It used to be that you have to write out all 3, and that would take a huge amount of footage in your paper, where if you were trying to take up space, that's great, but most of the time people aren't trying to take up space in the paper. So that's a wonderful change for us. That would be in chapter 8. So chapter 8 is all about, addresses the sort of works credited in the text and how to do in-text citations. Chapter 8 also has an extensive section on paraphrasing to prevent over-citation. And I know that some professors say you can't oversight something, meaning you can't cite too much in your paper, and they want you to paraphrase. If you hear that, if you get that feedback, this is the chapter that would help you. Chapter 8 is the chapter that would help you work on that. So you would go there to learn ways to rephrase something so that it's your words and the author's words combined in a way that's not plagiarism. Any questions?
Yes. Does et al. Not need a period now?
Oh my. I need to check that. I don't believe that it does, but I want to make certain. So let me get back to you. Goodness, I may be saying that a lot. I'm sorry. But excellent question. So I will check on that and get back with you. I just thought I'd put in something here that was just kind of fun. In reference works as in sin, omission is as bad as willful behavior, right? Huge amount of what you need to do when you're making sure that you're citing things is don't leave anything out, right? More information is better than less information. Chapters 9 and 10 deal with references. Chapter 9 focuses on updated guidance that's on this slide, and on the next slide. And so one of the things that's marvelous, I think, is that you no longer have to worry about the publisher location. The publisher location is often a problem because publishers don't just have one printing press in one location, and trying to figure out where your particular item was published, which press it came off of, can be very complicated. Depends on where your library buys things, right? And if the publisher is in New York and Atlanta, Virginia might have chosen either one. So we have to be careful about that. Well, now you don't have to be careful about that anymore, which is a relief because it's not that big a deal. You can usually find the copy, or you can locate a copy, and it doesn't matter where it actually was published. I think the historical reason for that may have been the difference between the Queen's English and American English, and knowing whether something had been published in London or New York. But APA has decided that that's not particularly relevant anymore. You still have to include up to 20 authors if you have an article or a book that's been written by lots and lots and lots of people. You still have to include them. Sorry about that. That's just, they're not going to drop that anytime soon, I suspect. And part of that has to do with how academia works and how people get credit for things, and how they can move forward based on materials that they've had published. So what is new here is that when you're quoting a podcast, you want to include the name of the host, right? So if you're quoting Joe Rogan's podcast, if you heard something on Joe Rogan's podcast, you want to list Joe Rogan as the host. I mentioned that because podcasting is now a way that people are finding material that they're actually putting into academic papers. So I just wanted to bring that up. And nobody cares if you got a book on Kindle. A book is a book is a book. So keep that in mind as well. Any questions with that?
So we have a question and an answer. First, someone in the chat answered the question about et al. And says it does require the period.
Excellent.
The question is it's a punctuation question. When you're listing 3 or more authors, do you, so the example is Silverstein et al. Do you put a comma after the name? So is it Silverstein comma et al. Or Silverstein et al. Without the comma?
I believe it is Silverstein comma et al. But again, I will check that. I should have made a full slide on et al. I can see now. I'm sorry about that. But I will get back with you with that. And thank you to the person who answered the period. That makes sense because it's actually an abbreviation.
I'm sorry, I had a quick question too. So I heard you say something, it kind of went out when you were talking about more than one author. I wanted to know, do we name all, like you said something about 20 authors, we name all the authors first, right? And then after, that's when we use the et al. Is that true?
No, those are two different, sorry, this is the reference page for the 20 authors in the reference page. The other one was the in-text citation.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah,
Yes.
you would never put 20 authors in an in-text citation, even in old APA.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah, I know that would be horrible, wouldn't it? Oh my goodness.
Yes.
Yes, my entire page is just one citation. Yeah, no, this is for the reference page, and that's for in-text. Does that make sense?
Yes, and okay, thank you.
Great, you're welcome. I'm sorry, I should have made that more clear because yeah, that would be terrifying.
I just got an answer to the question about the comma and in the chat, and it has no comma. So no comma after the name.
At all period, comma, and the date.
Right. The question was, would there be a comma after Silverstein? And the answer is no.
Thank you, somebody who's checking on these things.
Yeah,
Yay.
it looks like they have a copy of the APA 7th manual in front of them because
Effort.
they're referring to page numbers as well.
Excellent. Okay, so the DOI, when a DOI is available, you should use it in preference to the URL, but when the work has no DOI, a URL is the perfectly acceptable way to go about that. And it's now, and DOIs are now formatted as URLs. Wow, I'm sorry, I'm a little worried that none of that made any sense. So if you have any questions, please do ask. But the key here there being, you don't have to use retrieved dates. You just have to have the DOI or the URL, which I think is a big relief. I'm sorry, did I see a question come in, Aaron? It would not surprise me after I tortured that.
Someone just said that makes sense.
Okay. it would not surprise me after I tortured that sentence, and for that I apologize. A couple of things that I wanted to briefly cover that we're also not going to cover here in any sort of real extent is the Chapter 11 covers Blue Book and other legal references. Blue Book is still a standard for legal references, even with APA. APA defers to Blue Book. There are some tweaking bits that APA has done to Blue Book, but for the most part, if you are citing legal resources, you would need to use Blue Book. There are print copies of the Blue Book in the library, in Cabell Library, and down at the medical library. So you should be able to access that. I don't know that the Blue Book is online. I don't believe that it is, because I think we've asked for copies and haven't been able to get a copy online. But there are also a lot of research libraries, legal research libraries, that have guides up that talk about how to do Blue Book. So if you get stuck, please do feel free to email Aaron or I, and we can consult with other folks and try to figure out. Not too long ago, I had somebody who needed to reference a legal reference from a law in France, and so we had to kind of figure that out. So it's not that was not addressed in APA. I ended up having to dig around at Harvard's website actually to find the answer to that question. And then there's Chapter 12, and Chapter 12 covers the publication process. So it basically explains to you how APA perceives that the publication process should work. But you should always keep in mind that if you are publishing an article or a book, go with, especially an article in a journal, go with whatever journal citation style they're using. And almost all journals have adjusted citation styles in some way. So you would want to look at the author's notes on their pages in order to figure out exactly how they want you to format your citations. Sometimes in the editing process, they will fix that for you, but most of the time they will send it back for you to fix it for yourself. Do we have any questions about that?
Nope.
Okay. All right, so that's some mechanics that we've covered. We didn't, as I said, cover all of it. There are lots and lots of mechanics out there to, lots of little bits and pieces to change, but these are the major things. And now we are going to move on to the philosophical changes.
Okay, bear with me while I make sure I'm sharing the right screen. All right, y'all should be seeing philosophical changes in a statute. Okay, cool. I do want to start out by saying, since we've had questions and since we've had someone great in the audience who does have a copy and is referring to it, that the library does have copies of the APA 7th edition in the library, but they do not circulate. So you would have to go to the library to use them. So just wanted to point that out in case anyone, and that link into the catalog record has been put in the chat in case you want to know where to get it from. All right. All right, so philosophical changes. So the APA rationale for these changes from the APA blog: when weighing feedback on possible revisions to guidelines and new guidelines, we prioritized diversity, inclusion, and accessibility. We collaborated with advocacy organizations and experts to expand and revise our hallmark bias-free language guidelines and added new sections on participation in research, socioeconomic status, and intersectionality. I highly recommend reading the APA blog posts regarding the updates, and I'm going to refer to them throughout my presentation. Okay, sorry, I could not help but look at the chat. All right, so Chapter 5 covers bias-free language. The new guidance, like I mentioned, is about participation in research, socioeconomic status. Oh, let's see. All right, I just muted someone. And intersectionality. So the general guidance for bias-free language is to describe it at the appropriate level of specificity. So be as relevant and specific as possible when you're describing groups. For example, instead of describing an age group as over 65, use a specific age range. And the second general guidance is be sensitive to labels and call people what they call themselves. And that is something that I'm going to be repeating throughout this portion of the presentation, is when in doubt, call people what they call themselves. So for an example of using adjectives, instead of using an adjective to describe a group of people, using descriptive phrases. So instead of describing a group as the elderly, say older people. There are really helpful examples of problematic and bias-free language for each of these groups, and I highly recommend checking it out in the blog. And I'm going to elaborate a bit more on the new guidance that's completely new for this edition. So participation in research refers to what to call individuals who are participating in your research. So for example, they might be patients. If it's in a like healthcare setting, they might be clients. They might just be called participants. This section also provides guidance on using clinical terms, and it directs researchers to write in a way that acknowledges participants' contributions and agency, such as using the active voice. When discussing socioeconomic status, use specific person-first language to avoid pejorative negative connotations. For example, instead of homeless, write people experiencing homelessness, and strength-based rather than deficit-based language. And finally, intersectionality is a concept developed by Kimberly Crenshaw in 1989 to describe how race, gender, sexuality, disability, and other identities intersect, particularly with regard to structural inequality. This edition directs researchers to address intersectionality in a paper by identifying individuals' relevant characteristics and group memberships and describe how their characteristics and group memberships intersect in ways that are relevant to the study. For example, if you're reporting on the impacts of race and gender, rather than reporting on how many individuals of each race and then how many individuals of each gender participated, report out each group resulting from the intersection of race and gender. So for example, white men, white women, white non-binary people, Black men, Black women, Black non-binary people, etc. I'm going to pause there if there are any questions from the chat. And I will give, sorry, you said no?
Nope.
All right, I'll give just another minute in case anyone wants to type anything. And you can see that I've included links to the blog, the APA style blog, where it provides much more detail and examples about bias-free language. Okay. The singular they. This is in section 4.18. I have a quote here from the APA style blog about their rationale. And I just want to highlight that APA advocates for the singular they because it is inclusive of all people and helps writers avoid making assumptions about gender. So always use a person's self-identified pronoun, including when a person uses the singular they as their pronoun. Also use they as a generic third-person singular pronoun to refer to a person whose gender is unknown or irrelevant to the context of the usage. Do not use he or she alone as generic third-person singular pronouns. Use combination forms such as he or she or he only if you know that these pronouns match the people being described. So he or she is not inclusive enough. They is what you should use if you do not know a person's pronouns. Don't use combinations such as the parentheses S-H-E or S/HE for the same reasons that you wouldn't want to say she or he. And again, just driving this point home, if you do not know the pronouns of the person being described, reword the sentence to avoid a pronoun or use the pronoun they. All right, any questions about the singular they? I will give a few seconds in case anyone is typing. Also, obviously, feel free to unmute yourself if that is easier. I don't want anyone to be prevented from asking questions because typing is too challenging in this medium. Okay. All right, racial and ethnic identity is handled in section 5.7. So again, use terms that your participants use themselves. It's important to know the difference between race and ethnicity and not impose racial labels on ethnic groups. In short, in very short, race is physical and socially constructed, and ethnicity is cultural. So an example is my race is white and my ethnicity is Latinx. Use the most specific category possible. So I am Cuban American, which is my more specific term rather than the broader term of Latinx for my ethnicity. Capitalize and don't hyphenate these. And you can see an example in my slides. So Asian American, Asian and American are capitalized and they are not connected by a hyphen. There's a lot of great specific guidance on different racial and ethnic groups in this blog post. One specific example I'll highlight because it's highlighted by the APA is Hispanic versus Latinx. They're often used interchangeably, but they mean distinct things. Hispanic refers to Spanish-speaking people. Latino, Latina, Latinx refers to the geographic region of Latin America. Some people are both, but not every Latin American country speaks Spanish. Some people call themselves Hispanic, some Latino, Latina, Latinx. Always use the terms people themselves use. Any questions about that? That is great. I am very glad to hear that Microsoft Word is not trying to indicate that they as a singular is not grammatically correct. Sorry, I realized that if people were chatting me privately that I didn't want to miss those. So I'm still checking the chat, but please, Nia, continue to do so. All right, I'm going to move on. All right, this is the final portion. In section 8.9, the APA provides guidance on citing traditional knowledge or oral traditions. So if this is recorded, so if it is in print, if it's a video, audio, cite it as usual for the medium in which it's recorded. But to describe traditional knowledge or oral traditions that are not recorded, which makes sense if it's an oral tradition, use a variant of the personal communication citation. And that specific guidance is including the individual's name, the name of the indigenous group or nation to which they belong, their location, any other relevant data, and the term personal communication and the date. And you want to make sure to capitalize the names of indigenous groups and nations, as well as words specific to these indigenous cultures, such as oral tradition, elder, and vision quest. I will pause for questions on this. All right, so in addition to having the actual style manual in the library for your use, we have created a research guide on citation styles. This covers a lot of commonly used citation styles, including APA, and this basically provides really helpful links to resources that you can use in addition to or instead of the style manual when you're talking about citation specifically. I think we probably link to the APA blog because it's super helpful. And again, I highly recommend checking it out. And there are also some good guides that have been created for helping people craft in text and reference citations in different styles. All right, so that is all the content we have. Now I'm opening it up to any questions about anything we talked about. Looks like there's been some good answering of questions in the chat.
And I would like to take a moment to say I'm sorry about the confusion on the et al. Slide. Thank you for catching it, and I will fix it before we post this so that it's correct when we post it.
Someone's asking if we can share a copy of the slides. I have no problem with sharing a copy of the viewable slides, and we will do that as soon as any corrections or edits we need to make have been made. I think we have everyone's email from registration. Okay, and Kelsey's actually provided a link that you should just bookmark because that's where the recording and slides are going to be posted. So yeah, never mind. We're not going to email you. Less work for us.
I would like to say this one more time because I want to make sure that we hammer this home. As much as APA can write a manual and try to demand that you handle things in a certain way, your professor, your instructor's word always trumps whatever you find in the manual. If your professor wants something, your instructor wants something done a certain way, then you will do it that way. If you want to have a good relationship with that professor, and we would encourage you to do that, right? We want you to follow their guidelines. This is in absence of guidelines from your professor. But if you get guidelines from your professor, please always, those trump this.
Thank you all for participating. Thank you for your great questions. Thank you for the help with the answers. And thank you for all of your thanks that are popping into the chat.
Yep. Thank you very much. Y'all have been wonderful today. And we hope that everybody has a great afternoon and that you go buy the manual and play around with it.
Oh, I am seeing a question that I missed in the chat because it was private to me. And I'll just ask it out because somebody else on this, you know, Zoom might know the answer. Are you aware of any copy editors that professors could contract with to assist with technical edits with APA formatting? I feel like Julie might. Is Julie still here? Only because Julie is the librarian's librarian and knows everything.
Mean professional humans that do that?
Yeah.
The English department often has a list of professional humans that do that, that graduate humans that do that. So you might consider approaching the English department. Oh, what answer did you give them? You've had students ask about this? The Writing Center will not edit material for an individual, but they might have individuals who would contract to do it with you privately. So that would be another good place to talk to ask about it.
So I had a private question about if there will be more opportunities to do a deep dive for writing a reference list. We don't have a webinar plan for that, but you can feel free to email Nia, I guess. You're the Citation Styles guide. If you need help with formatting a reference list correctly. All right, let me quickly skim for more private questions. All right, I'm not seeing any.
Thank you, everybody. Enjoy your afternoon.
Yep, that's it. You're free to go if you want, or if you want to hang back and ask us questions. We'll stay here for another few minutes just in case.